One of the things my mother used to say to us, almost like she didn't physically do it, but almost like she was shaking us when she said these words. She says, "You guys better never not talk to each other."
When Prohibition was repealed in the United States, the first thing that was allowed was to have beer bars. And then so after that, Dad decided he was going to get into the beer business. I'm Donald O'Sullivan. I'm son of Paul O'Sullivan and Virginia O'Sullivan. I'm 82 years old and still going strong. My dad's a 15-year-old kid, okay? He would say, "Don, go pick up the whiskey, okay, at the state store." "Okay, Dad."
And they would give it to you?
And they would be in there and they'd say, "Oh, it's Sully's son. Put it in the trunk."
The beer distributor truck would park right here. So many cases of bottled beer, so many barrels of beer, and they would wheel it in, put the cases in where my mom wanted them in the back. There was a back room where they stacked them up. I'm Paul T. O'Sullivan, the second son of Paul and Virginia O'Sullivan, and I'm 79 years old.
There were three breweries: Fort Pitt, Duquesne, and Iron City, and they had different brands. They had Silvertop. It was kind of the high end of Iron City, but they actually built wooden boxes and sealed them with tar, and they'd put the beer in there with ice to keep it cold. That was their beginnings. Not very sanitary, probably. I'm Tom O'Sullivan. I'm Paul and Dawn are my brothers. I'm 77 years old. His brother Jim, my uncle Jim, they basically got the thing started. He was kind of a silent partner. My mom, Virginia, she'd start off in the morning. She opened up, but she'd probably be here at least by 10 o'clock.
Okay.
And you'd have salesmen coming in and trying to sell stuff. But she would go down to Perlof's, which was down here. She'd buy cigars and candy, and then the state liquor store, she'd buy cases of whiskey. The beer distributor, he would bring in the wooden kegs of beer.
So were they big?
You had to roll them, because they were very heavy.
Yeah.
And my mother would, remember her rolling up a keg of beer. She wasn't a real big lady. From the back, rolling it, tipping it on edge, putting a tap into it. Sometimes the beer would shoot up.
Then there was one point where my father invested in a cooler system. The smaller barrel, it was made of metal, and it was much easier to handle.
What kind of beer was it?
The brand names would be Duquesne, Iron City, Fort Pitt.
It was all lagers.
No dark beer or anything like that? Or?
In the fall, he would get Bach beer.
Bach beer.
In bottles.
Yeah.
And there was also a place that you could buy beer here and take it home.
And so it was mainly like blue collar folks coming in after work, and then at night families would come in.
Correct.
I'm Sean O'Sullivan. I'm the son of Don here. I've got a brother named Patrick. I'm 55. I feel like for once I'm the youngest person in the room.
Right above over the bar, there was a neon sign. It was O'Sullivan's Cafe. The dining room was very nice. There was booths on each side, and each booth had there was a jukebox, and they would be hooked up to the jukebox, so they could go through and pick the music they wanted to play. My mother would cook for lunch. People would come in and have soup and hamburgers, hard-boiled eggs, and then she would put her waitress uniform on at night. Husbands and wives and kids would come into the dining room.
At the very end, there was a door that led into a little small office. And in that office was a man by the name of Rosie
Rosenberger.
And then his buddy was Joe
Yo. Yeah.
These two guys were the local Mount Oliver Mafia.
Rosie Rosenberger, he had a bunch of slot machines which were illegal, and I think he was going to maybe get raided, so he took all of his slot machines that he had them in the garage downstairs and covered them up with tarps.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah.
I think we helped ourselves.
Yeah, I went down there one time with a hammer to the quarter machine, and I banged on it and broke all the quarters. I swept them in my pocket.
But there were a lot of slot machines.
Somebody was upset with my father.
Yeah.
And I don't know how he got in at night, but he let a mountain lion loose inside the barn. And it totally...
A mountain lion.
mountain lion.
A mountain lion.
A mountain lion.
Okay.
He totally destroyed the bar because he ran over everything. He came in the next morning and the place was a shambles, and there's this mountain lion.
It was sitting, I think it was above the men's room.
Yeah, it was sitting up above the benches. Yeah.
So what was the name Chatterdine? Where did that name come from? What was the...
Chat and dine.
But I mean, was that a common name in the area to call something a chat and dine? I just made it up. What was Mount Oliver like back then? We know it seems like it's changed a little bit, but back then, what was it like?
Very nice area, very busy, all kind of little stores.
There was a bank, a barber, a jewelry
shoe
store.
stores.
And you said there was a streetcar that used to come up and down the street here?
Two sets of tracks, one coming and one going.
So it sounds like it was a real vibrant neighborhood. Like, there's a lot of activity, families.
A lot of privately owned stores.
What's your fondest memory of?
I think New Year's Eve, being here, our cousin Joe, playing in the pinball machines and not having to put money in it.
Yeah, he had 2 pinball machines next to the bar, and we became experts. We didn't have to put any money in the pinball machines because our father owned the place.
And he
326 McKinley Street. So what was it like living here? What was it? What was the setup? It was you all in one room, or?
Paul and I, when we were younger, we would sleep in what we called the sun porch. We had 2 youth beds in there, and Don had the classy bed in the living room. It was a sofa bed.
Were you born in this house?
I spent I was born in 41, so I was here to 41 to 53.
Paul was born here. I was born somewhere else, and I put in an apartment somewhere else. But Paul and Tom were both born in this house, if you will.
What was the day-to-day kind of thing here? Were you your mom would get you ready in the morning? It sounds like you were probably self-sufficient in a lot of ways, or?
Yeah.
Very much so.
There was really nothing to do except go somewhere. And we would go down to the dump over here, to the bottom of this hill.
It was a city dump.
It's a city dump. We would go down there into the woods behind the dump and go for a walk, just on our own, and do whatever we wanted to do.
Yeah. We would play softball. We'd have to cover the sewers up so the ball wouldn't go in it. And if it would go in his yard, he'd call the police.
That was our baseball field, the middle of that intersection.
That intersection here.
And did you have pets or anything like that? Animals or anything like that? Or
we had hamsters. We had a dog for a bit. We had a rabbit.
Was it just a normal childhood here? Was it?
Yeah, it was good.
A lot of kids in the neighborhood. We drove our bikes up and down, and we would sled ride that hill and this hill in the winter.
And what was it? What kind of neighborhood was it? Was it mainly Irish, Polish?
I think it was German.
And would your family come here and for holidays and?
Yeah. My grandmother, my cousins on the O'Sullivan side would come. Absolutely. My Uncle Pete.
Actually, the only day we really sat down and had dinner as a family was Sunday.
Yeah.
My mother would always make sure there was food. Either she served us or it was there for us to eat when a time came at dinner. And my father, he was never home at dinner time because he would go down to the tavern around, say 1, 2 o'clock, and he wouldn't get home until 2 o'clock in the morning.
We had dish duty. We 2 days on and 2 days. You washed 2 days, you dried 2 days, and 2 days you were off, and my mother took care of Sunday.
So did the Polish side and the Irish side, did they ever kind of hang out together?
Yes.
Did y'all get together?
Oh, yeah.
My mother started to date my father. He wasn't Polish, obviously. And of course my mother was. And my grandfather was 100% Polish. He came over through Ellis Island. Back then, they wanted people to marry Polish, Irish, whatever. He never really had a lot of fun for my dad until one day he found out my dad owned a bar. Bingo! You're the greatest guy on the earth, you know?
Yeah, right.
I think our other grandfather lived in this building here. The Gov.
So who was the Gov?
My dad's father. He lived across the street for a while. He kind of moved around different places, but I know he lived here for a while.
Did you see him a lot? Was he a big factor in your life, or?
He would come to the bar. He was an electrician. He would remember him coming over there. There was a people there. He did some electrical work for them.
Did he have a wife?
Well, yeah, she died when Dad was a teenager.
When we lived here, there was a streetcar that ran up and down. One time he broke down right here, right in front of the Schneider's house. And he went into Schneider's house to call the company. And this guy, Don, got in and took the controls.
I was doing something I shouldn't have done, but I was very interested in how do you drive a streetcar. And so I got in, so the guy, the operator of the streetcar was not there. And so I went into the streetcar and I said, let's see, I remember him doing this and doing that. So I started to move the streetcar, and then I accidentally hit the sand button, and the sand came pouring out of the bottom of the streetcar onto the track. But that's so that it wouldn't be slippery. I realized I shouldn't have done that, and so I ran home, and I hid at home, and then somebody came knocking on the door, and I never answered the door.
Well,
So I got away with it.
and I can tell you this, that the streetcar operator was pretty upset with you.
He was upset, yeah. I was a good escape artist in those days.
Yeah. Don was into this radio stuff at a very young age. So he made these crystal sets out of cigar boxes.
Well, I can remember one Christmas, all my brother Don wanted was a chemistry set. He gets a toilet paper roll, plugs up the bottom end, and he fills it up with
It was powdered magnesium, potassium nitrate, and powdered charcoal.
okay,
And
yeah,
that was gunpowder.
yeah. So then he made
Which I found out
he
later
made a
was
fuse.
gunpowder.
He goes back on the back. Our playground in the back is the roof of the garage behind his house. He lights this thing and runs. It goes off, and there is smoke over the whole neighborhood. And of course, again, being an escape artist, he hides somewhere, you know.
That wasn't the only bomb you made, Don, because you made another one. Going into the cellar, there was a concrete step, and you put it on that step. And I thought, this thing's not going to go off. And I sat down next to it.
I remember that.
And I got
You got burned.
got a blistered leg.
Yeah, and my mother was really mad at me, you know.
So,
But he wasn't supposed to sit next to it.
well, I doubted your bomb making ability.
I see. Well, it was pretty good, wasn't it?
Actually, it was too good.
So going back to the radio thing, I mean, I'd heard a story once that you were broadcasting.
I actually built a transmitter that would transmit probably a block, 2 blocks away. And if you had a radio, you could receive the radio signal in your house. People that used to listen to us talking. We got into a lot of trouble, by the way.
It sounds like you did.
As
You made
probably
bombs.
can
You had a
guess.
legal radio station. You
but
you were driving around on like stolen streetcars. It sounds like.
But anyhow, we had a lot of fun here.
This was actually the center of the steel industry in the United States. This bit right here in this area. All the mills were along Carson Street and Second Avenue on the other side.
On Second Avenue, they would cast the ingots and then send them over on Hut Metal Bridge. On this side, they would scarf off the real bad stuff. This was my grandparents' house. They raised their 6 children here.
The left side here was Stanley and Selma. The last name was Chanowski. They lived here on the left-hand side of this building, and on the right side, our aunt Wanda, her husband Joe, and their children Joe and Carolyn lived in the right side here. Their name was Grahowski, right?
His nickname was Beans.
Beans.
Beans, yeah.
Because in Polish, I think gro means beans.
We used to come down here and have Sunday dinners. It was just, it was a fun place to come.
We'd sleep over sometimes.
We would come here and have a good time.
My grandfather would have his steak dinner, his round steak.
Round steak and onions and a bottle of wine. Then he'd fall asleep.
I have memories of when I was quite young at that time. He worked in the steel mill, the Jones and Laughlin Steel Corporation, and he would walk from work. He would be so dirty from working in that steel mill. And I would run down there whenever I heard he's coming home and walk back with him to the house.
When my grandfather would come home from the mill, my grandmother actually would hose him off. He was so full of soot.
He used to go to the basement and strip naked, and then she would hose him off in the basement because she didn't want him in the rest of the house.
Those guys come out of that mill, you wonder how they lived as long as they did.
This part of Pittsburgh was fully polluted.
She washed the steps off every day.
Well, a lot of the soot came from the fact that the trains, they burned coal, so the smoke came right out of the stack of the engines and just went everywhere.
Yeah.
And that smoke was actually ash. And the ash settled right here.
And then in the winter, people go up there with a basket and they'd pick up the coal that fell off the coal tenders so they could use that to heat their homes in the
This
winter.
used to be a coal chute, and they would shoot the coal into the furnace or into the room, and they shoveled into the furnace.
Yeah, I used to go down in there and I used to help shovel the coal into the chute. The coal would be delivered. They'd deliver a pile of coal. Whoever lived here had to shovel it into the chute so it would go down into the basement. And once it was in the basement, then you'd feed the furnace to heat the house.
There was an outhouse in the back, so if you had to go to the bathroom at night,
You had to go outside.
In the middle of winter.
In the middle of winter.
in the middle of winter, you had to go outside, yeah.
Wow.
The house has a porch in the back, and I remember after the war, there were just trains, just like endless train loads of equipment coming back from Europe. It used to fascinate me as a little kid to sit there and watch all this equipment.
Like
coming.
large equipment like tanks, and
Tanks,
Jeeps.
Very large.
Yeah, trucks. We would come down often. Joe was Paul and I's age, and we would spend a lot of time.
Yeah, we used to take a streetcar down and then walk from Carson Street up.
Street up.
Was there anything like, did you try to set a bomb off here or anything like that?
No,
or
I
was there
didn't,
any,
I
did you
didn't
get
do
any trouble
anything
here?
No, because my grandparents would frown upon that.
Yeah, so you were well behaved when you were here.
Yeah, his home base was back on McKinley Street.
My grandfather never drove a car.
No, he never. My grandmother never became a citizen.
Oh, really?
Yeah, actually, she didn't speak any English.
Yeah, she spoke. It was pretty broken.
She spoke a little bit of English, but just every other.
Wait, your grandmother was never a citizen? The Polish side?
No, she never became a citizen.
She
no.
never did. My mom would talk to her mom in Polish. Occasionally they'd use some English, but if they didn't want us to understand anything, they'd switch totally to Polish.
Well, I can remember the one thing that I would not eat. My grandfather used to make a thing called duck's blood soup. He would buy a live duck, cut the head off, and drain the blood. That was one of the main ingredients in the soup. I refused to eat it.
Yeah, I wouldn't eat it either.
I never.
It's had a pretty good run. I mean, 20 some odd years. Why did it close?
Well, what happened is that people all stopped going out with the advent of television. You know, one of the advantages of having a bar, you could have a television set. People would come and watch television at the bar. But then televisions became less expensive. People would bought them for their houses. Business went down.
Was there ever a television in here?
Yeah, there was a television in the bar.
Yeah, in fact,
Bought the first color TV, had it up behind the bar. I can remember the Notre Dame Army game, I believe it was. He put a banner in the front of the bar. That day, you couldn't even get into the front door. They wanted to see the game, they wanted to see a color TV, and they were just passing the bottles back and
Yeah,
forth.
it was probably completely illegal. It was just overloaded.
Wow.
People were just drinking beer and watching TV. And
So what happened? Why did it shut down?
you know, and I remember him telling me that he kind of got tired of seeing some of his friends over drinking.
he was depressed. That was his business. And he basically started this bar with nothing.
Yeah. On a kind of a sad note, I guess, where my dad was drinking a lot, he took an axe and chopped out all the windows on the bar. My mom had it boarded up.
He just got upset one night and decided
I
that
don't
he hated
know,
those windows?
It's just a bad scene.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's too bad.
Kind of a sad period for him. He had received some promises for jobs which he couldn't get. I started working when I was in the sophomore year of high school at a men's clothing store. My dad asked me, "Can you get this?" I'm 16 years old. He says, they were looking for a store manager. So I talked to the owner, and so my dad went in and took the interview. My dad did work there for a while, waiting on customers, and here I am doing my thing, whatever I was doing at the store, and it seemed like everyone would come into the store say, Paul, did you buy this place? He knew more people in that store than the guy who owned the place.
So what happened? It burned down, obviously.
Well, it burned down after it was sold.
So how did the fire start? What was it all about?
The rumor was that the people that owned the building, they wanted to get their money out of it, and it was insured. So there's a lot of people that think it was a purposely set fire to burn the building down and to get out of the mortgage.
Shortly after that, my dad took a heart attack.
For a man who started something from scratch to wind up with, I hate to say it, almost nothing, it was tough. It was tough on him. Of course, at that age, I didn't recognize that.
Nor did I.
You know, I mean, how would I know somebody was going through depression and so forth?
And my mother, of course, had to go to work. She got a job at Kroger's. She was 43 at the time.
Did you feel like great sense of burden on the whole thing, or were you having to go out to work as well, or?
Well,
Well,
Tom
Paul
did.
Paul and I both got jobs in high school.
Yeah, I was a janitor in a high school.
And I felt the sadness, I guess, if you will.
My dad died in January. He died at
Southside Hospital.
Southside Hospital.
So you had to go. He went to the hospital for some other reason, and then.
We were actually Southside Hospital. It's right near Duquesne Brewery. It's no longer there. It was torn down. They had him in a oxygen tent, is what they called it. And unfortunately, Dawn didn't make it home in time. Paul and I were both there. My mother, my Uncle Pete, and he passed away in the hospital.
Dawn had to come home from college and attend an Irish funeral, which you're laid out for 4 to 5 days. Then everybody goes back to the house and they get drunk. So when that was all over, and he was buried, my brother had to go back to college. He had 1 semester, that was it. And he said to my mother, I'm not going back, I'll get a job. She said, no way. And he had to go back, keep his mind on what he was doing, and he graduated. To me, that takes a heck of a lot.
And then when Dawn got out of school, got to Pittsburgh, he got a job. He would you would give your whole paycheck to Mom except for some spend money.
Yeah, I gave her the whole thing because I essentially became the breadwinner of the family. I wanted to do it, and so she would give me money when I'd go out on a date, for example. I said, I'm going out on a date, Mom. So she doled out the money and took care of the bills. And
Dawn basically worked to help to support the family.
When Tom graduated college, Dawn was still home at the time.
yeah,
And he graduated, he came home, and of course he had to go out looking for a job. And I think Tom may have had a sport coat, something like that, you know. My brother Don says, you can't go out looking on an interview looking like that. You know, you have to get yourself a suit.
Bought
My
me a
brother
suit of
Don
clothes.
gave Tom $100 to go out and buy a suit
At Brooks Brothers.
at Brooks Brothers.
Wow, big shot.
Yeah.
Big shot.
big shot.
And Tom had a few jobs, but he wound up, the last one worked out extremely well, and he worked very hard at it. He did well, but he worked extremely hard
But
at
Don stepped up to the plate
it. Yes, he did.
as a young man. All of us, I think, we all had some bumps. At least I'll speak for myself.
I think the person that held the whole thing together, Mom,
Yeah, she did.
She was-
because her one word was, my boys.
Yeah, she was the glue.
That continued on.
And
Even
after-
after we were grown and, doing
Yeah.
our own thing,
Yeah.
it was still my boy.
Yeah, she did whatever she could do, even as we were adults.
You know, one of the reasons why I wanted to do this was to hear these stories, but to also be able to pass this on to, your grandkids and their kids. You've had this incredible experience growing up in, the steel mill town of Pittsburgh. It's kind of extraordinary in some ways to be raised in the family that you have been, with the parents that you had, with this bar and all that, and the ups and downs, which we all have in life. If you had a life philosophy, or if you could say something to the next generation, what would you tell them? Take a moment.
That's a good question. Hard question to answer.
My answer to that would be, if you're going to raise children, the thing you have to teach that child is love.
Yeah, I just say, be true to yourself and be good to other people.
And I agree with both what they both said, but I would add to that whatever you do in life, make sure you love it. Don't do anything just because somebody tells you that's what you should do. Do whatever it is that you love to do, in addition to what Paul said and Tom said.
Yeah, I think the bottom line is you just have to go through life every day being good to people.
It's true.
That's, just do-
Everybody's the same.
Yeah, forget it. Yeah, regardless of who it is. Yeah.
Everybody is the same. We're all human beings. Treat everybody equally. Doesn't matter.
And if you can help somebody who's in need, help them. Don't just put it off.